Yasas, everyone, and welcome to Greek Talk, the premier video podcast for Greek genealogy enthusiasts. Greek Talk is hosted by Gregory Kontos, founder of Greek Ancestry, and co-hosted by Georgia Stryker-Kaleman of the Hellenic Genealogy Geek and Karl Kostakos-Petranik of Spartan Roots. Back in 2021, after the first International Greek Ancestry Conference, we decided to launch the Village History Project Initiative, also known as the VHPI. The goal of the VHPI is to encourage and support researchers to delve into the history and genealogy not only of their own families, but also those of their villages or even broader areas. Today, we are excited to be joined by two members of the VHPI, Mary Laviolette and Dina Palamidis, who recently started a village history project focusing on the village of Karytaina in Arcadia. Welcome, Mary and Dina.
Hello.
Hi.
So, Mary, tell us a little bit about your village, Karytaina. To be honest, I have never visited, but I have heard it's gorgeous. And as you're talking, I'll also show some pictures we have.
So I first came to Karytaina when I got married because it's the village of my father-in-law. And in those days, it took us 8-9 hours to come over the mountains, but now we have tunnels through the mountains and can come quickly. So when I came, and it is really beautiful here. It's actually on a list of the 10 most beautiful villages in Greece. And it has a lot of history too. We have a Frankish castle, and Kolokotronis family was from here, his father's family. So the headquarters of the revolution were here for the first 4 years. And my husband was a historian as well as many other things. And I guess he inspired his cousin Eleni to get interested in copying the village records. And we got permission from the priest to go and copy them. And I extended my stay. For several months we were copying the records. It was kind of dimly lit in the church, so we tried a new strategy. We spoke the records into a tape, took them home, transcribed them, and then went back and checked them all. So there's all kinds of notations of each entry being checked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the records, some of them, they go back to about 1884, some of them, the oldest ones. Some of the first pages had fallen off, and the records now are not in the village. Some Mitroarenon and Dimotologio are in the Dimos in Megalopoli, but not the ones we had. We got a 50-year older version of Dimotologio. So it was good that happened.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we're having some problems with the PowerPoint. This is why you're not seeing anything right now, guys, but I'm trying to fix it. So, Mary, can you tell us a little bit more about the records that you and Eleni found? You know, what type of records those were?
From the
was
church,
it easy to get them?
From the church, we got the birth, baptism records, the marriage records, the death records, and we transcribed them into the usual student blue notebooks. And from the community, we got civil marriage records and death records that didn't go through the church. And in addition, they let us photocopy the registry of men, which they used for the army, that in Greek called Mitroarenon, and the registry of families, the Dimotologio. And of course, the Dimotologio was handwritten. So even though we photocopied it, it was just to preserve the record. We couldn't really read it. And thanks to you, Gregory, now we'll be able to read it.
So what year was this, Mary? This was a long time ago.
This was in 1976.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So they were
Uh,
much more open to showing you all the records, and you were a
right.
local, actually, or a
In
new local.
1976, the seat of the local government was still in Karytaina. Since then, it has changed a couple times, but now it's in Megalopoly. So and a lot of records have been taken home by various people in order to preserve them. But one of the historians to whom they were given, he lost all his documents in a flood because he lived near a stream. So it became even more important that we copied these.
So I have a question. My question is for Greg. So Mary just said that somebody had taken some of those old records home to quote preserve them unquote. So my question is, do you think that this is happening throughout other repositories in Greece, or is this just kind of an unusual circumstance?
I would say that unfortunately, it is not an unusual circumstance. The thing is, many of these people who borrow these records for, you know, uh, shorter or longer periods of time, they're really interested. They really are interested in preserving the records. In many cases, what is not realized is that they're not experts and they don't have the resources to do that. So, collecting records is one thing. Being able to preserve them is another thing, and it's a crucial one. So, yeah, it's not uncommon, and even archivists used to do that in the past.
Okay, I didn't want to get off topic, but I think it's important to point out for people that if there aren't records that you can find for your area, that doesn't mean they don't exist. They could be in somebody's house. They could show up at the archive at some point later. And Mary and Dina, I guess now we're going to talk about some more of those records and how they were accessed. But I think the takeaway here is don't ever give up. You don't know what's out there.
Yeah. I want to ask a question now. Dina, you live in Canada and Mary lives in Greece. How did you two hook up and decide to work on this project together?
Well, it's all about DNA. Mary's husband had done his DNA, and he was my closest match on my Greek family line. I'm half Scottish and half Greek. We connected through the messenger on Ancestry. And then that was in, I think, January of 2022. And we started to work together online using Zoom because we could share our screens and collaborate. And at that time, we were using mostly historical books that we both had copies of and whatever resources were online. Then I decided in 2023 to go to Greece and take full-time language training for a month. And I made that trip 6.5 weeks. And the last part of the trip was purely for genealogical research. And then Mary invited me to stay with her, which really changed my experience, and it allowed us to collaborate right from the start. So here you can see some of the efforts of our collaboration. Gregory very kindly lent us his high-speed professional book flattening scanner that does amazing OCR images, and Mary had fortunately recovered all of those records. We missed that part of the story where the records and the copies of those records went in the intervening years from 1976 to 2023. I'll let Mary share that.
Okay, but before she does, what I want to know is, how did you guys decide to go from your own personal family genealogy to creating something that would encompass the entire village?
Well, back in 1976, when we copied the records, we realized that everyone was related. If they weren't your cousins, they were your cousin's cousins. So knowing that, when John and I did the DNA test on Ancestry in September of 21, I just kept going after I made his tree. I just kept adding everybody. It was just like, it was really an extension of what we started in 1976. It wasn't now, it was from before. the image, and it gave me a great retirement project. I had already decided to retire here in Karytaina. This is my main residence here. But I hadn't actually, because I didn't have the records in my possession. Our cousin, John's cousin Eleni, who has since passed, she had worked on the records for a while, but then she gave them to John to keep them because he had a big house in Psycho. So they were in his house. He had moved, but they were with his things. And after he passed, it took us a year to get access. And it was only right before Dina arrived to visit last year that we actually got our hands on the records through layers of books and newspapers and files in his place. It was
so are these the notary records, or are these the other records you were talking about?
So both, because John's grandfather was the notary, and his great grandfather, it was the family business. They were all lawyers and notaries. And so when he saw the decrepit condition of the notary building and the files here and there, helter-skelter, he had collected them. And so there were several boxes of contracts, which now Gregory has scanned. So both the archive, the records, and these contracts were salvaged from his home. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's a good picture of the archives, I think. Next. No, there's a picture of the building.
Yeah, hold on.
I think we should have had Dina managing this presentation.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you for your trust.
The building on the left is the notary building of John's grandfather and great-grandfather. In fact, it has the initials of his great-grandfather in a stone that's hardly legible now because of the wear on the stone.
So those were my great uncles, and the balcony you can see right behind along the edge is the Palamedes residence of many generations. My great grandmother was a Nicolopoulos, and my great grandfather was a Palamedes, and you can see how proximate they were as families. We had lawyers as well in our family, so I wouldn't be surprised if they worked together in that building, because the buildings were attached. And we picked a few of these images just to give you a flavor of what the village looks like inside. The church, the little tiny church, Mary, I think there's 46 or 48 churches, you know the number. And
41.
41, and each family sponsors a church, and this one was sponsored by my Palamedes, my great grandfather and his family, and in it was a painting. They provided a gorgeous painting of St. George. And to the right at the top, the house with the sunroom was the Nicolopoulos house, and just below it was the Nicolopoulos church. And in the bottom at the middle is Mary's house. She has a spectacular view, which is what I photographed in the bottom right corner. So you go out on that balcony on her top floor and you can see the castle and the whole village and the changing weather. And some mornings you wake up and we're above the clouds and the church bells are ringing. It's really quite something.
Beautiful.
And we can see you over there in Sparta because we see Taillatos, especially when it's snow covered.
Absolutely. And I'll wave to you next time I'm there. Do either of you know what the origin of the name of the village is? Excuse me, Karytaina.
Actually, there's a lot of debate on that. We don't really know. The original name is Vrenthi, which was documented by Pausanias when he came through. He said Vrenthi was already in ruins. So the archaeologists believe that there's an ancient Greek site under the Castro, and then Byzantine, and then the Frankish. So Karytaina may be some derivative of Frankish occupation, some Latin. We don't know exactly. It's something from heart. We know that on the balconies they have these S curls, and if you put them right, they make a heart. So that's my theory, that it comes from the word heart. or from walnuts.
Right. Now, apart from the records that your families had or preserved, you also found some local history books. So have they helped you with your research and what you envision, to do with those?
Shall I tackle that one?
Sure, go ahead.
They've been tremendously helpful because we are very fortunate. There are two very active local historians, Mr. Antonopoulos and Mr. We call him Scooby. I can't remember his last name. Mary
Kostopoulos.
And thank you. And they both have transcribed many records and preserved many records in their books. We have made an effort to gather as many of the books that exist as possible. And we discovered when we approached Mr. Antonopoulos, we requested permission from him to take excerpts from his books and translate them into English. That there are books that we didn't know about. So we have a growing bibliography on resources available in Karytaina, and by scanning them and using optical character recognition, we have them in a G drive. We don't have permission to publish the books. We have permission to share excerpts, but we can scan for names in our drive. We've been able to copy, for example, Scooby transcribed, I think it was the 1907, the Mythologio.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't found the original one, but at least he preserved that by transcribing it, and we can see other names there. They've been tremendously helpful. And then we went on and we searched archives and libraries for additional resources, because we made our primary objective while I was there was to gather as much relevant information as we could find and digitize it where possible, so that we could use that to build our repository on the village after I returned home. You can't do the analysis and the transcription and so on in such a short period of time, but with that scanner that you lent us, it was tremendously helpful. And one interesting library we went to was the one in Andritsina, which is the bottom central image. The librarian there was really engaged with us, and she lent us books, and we shared with her digital copies that they only had one copy of, and they knew there was only one remaining copy. This is the problem with the village history books. They were limited production. If you can get your hands on them, there might be one or two out there, but at the same time, the copyright is not released until 70 years after the death of the author. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, you did. No, and this thing about village history books is really interesting and important. Perhaps we need to do a Greek talk just about that. Yeah, and I think you've already collected a very diverse, like diverse records, books, everything there is. So now, and as we're closing this episode, what are you planning to do with all this information? Is it going to be a tree? Is it going to be a website? What is your goal here?
Well, we have a tree on Ancestry, and what we did make a Facebook group for English-speaking people until we get organized to have our website. And on the website will be the tree and what many other things too. We have a few projects going. One about the houses. And we want to identify each house, the history of each house with photos. That's another side project that I developed. And we're going to have references to the contracts. So if anyone identifies one as belonging to their family, they can ask you for a transcription. And just stories. There are many interesting things about Karytaina. We've had a history of how to get water, and they've during different terms of different mayors, they've managed to get the water in part, and then it keeps progressing, getting better and better. It's quite good now. But for a while we had a problem in the past and historically. So there's many stories about the mills, about things that happened. It goes on and on. It's fascinating.
Is the tree accessible right now?
It's a public tree on Ancestry. It's not anywhere near complete because most of it is based on interviews with families here. We haven't had a chance to get the information from the records up there yet. So soon, I think I would like to have it a little more complete before we put it on the website. But
what's the title of it? If people are going to go look at it, what is the title of that?
Karytaina Village Project.
Okay.
So
now I have one last question before for me. So for new people wanting to start a village project like me, do you have any recommendations, any hints as to how we should start or what we should do? Dina?
Well, I do have a few recommendations.
Okay.
Encourage everyone to do their DNA testing. Yeah. Interview their own family members. And I'll just go back to the DNA. Ancestry was not accessible to much of the world until 2017, 2016, something like that. So many of us did our testing on platforms like Family Tree DNA or MyHeritage, or I'm a Canadian, so I couldn't use Ancestry. But once I did, I realized that I was connecting with many distant cousins on Ancestry. very different group of people than are on Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage. So I think the optimizing strategy for us in Karytaina is test on Ancestry if you can, then export your results to Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage and GEDmatch. We're starting to get some more closer cousins, and just last week we broke a really big brick wall. For me, anyway, I could see a relationship to several family lines that I'd never seen before, even though those names kept on coming up. And we know we're related. And even if we can't identify the women, we will have them by family surname at some point, and we can see the shared DNA segments. Don't make it too big a project. Like, we're doing this in baby steps, and we're learning with each thing. Like, I'm learning how to build a website. It's harder than I thought. It was easy to do a blog, but it's harder to build a website. Document and source your information as you go along. And one thing that's been very helpful for us is a shared Google Drive. And putting our resources in there. It is not expensive to upgrade the size of your drive, and it makes collaboration much, much easier. I don't know, Mary, do you have some other?
Well, I just want to say that it takes a village, and many people have participated in this project from the beginning. My husband, John Nikolopoulos, his cousin, Eleni Nikolopoulou Matsikas, Dina, me, all the people that I've been interviewing there, especially Dina Xurafas, she gave me a lot of information, and many other people here. The historians, John Antonopoulos and Dimitri Skobi Kostopoulos. So many people are participating and willing to help. And it's been very rewarding because in the summers, the last 2 summers, we've had people visiting from the States, and we've been able to help them connect with their roots. And so we look forward to everyone, whoever's interested in genealogy, and if they're from Karytaina, they're welcome to reach out and help, give a helping hand. We have a lot of little jobs that people could help us with, so we would love to delegate some of this.
Great.
Carol, you wanted to ask something?
I did. There was a question in the chat that I thought was important, and I just want to ask it before we say goodbye. One of the questions is, as you find names, how do you enter them into Ancestry? Like, do you have any specific rules for entering those names? And what do you do when there are discrepancies between records, which we all know there are, especially birth? Have you gotten to the point yet where you're dealing with those issues?
Mary and I have different approaches. Mary has standardized the transliteration. We've learned that we have to do it in Greek and in English on the family tree. And we just put if they're born in Greece, we put the Greek first and the English second, and vice versa. It's evolved. It's not all consistent. I believe in, I pick the original baptismal spelling, or if it's changed in a consistent way over the lifetime of the person, I'll switch the spelling to how that person presented themselves. But that, I'm thinking about both sides of my family. They're not just the Greek side, and Mary's the one that's built that tree.
Yeah, when someone migrates to America or Canada, then I indicate that by putting the English name first and then the Greek name. So even if they were born in Greece, if they then moved and lived in the States, even if they lived there for a chunk of their life and came back, because some people did that, then you'll see their the Latin English spelling first. Yeah.
That's a very interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
What about templates? Have you developed any templates as you collect information that you fill out specific forms or templates? Like, do you use family group sheets and in Greek or English as you're talking to people to collect the family information?
Well, we did have an arts festival in Karytaina last summer, so I did develop a sheet for that. People did not fill it out.
Okay.
It doesn't work with Greeks. You got to talk with them. Yeah, some people did, very few, and but it's a talking point. It helps. But we didn't have this publicity. Now we have the Facebook group, and even another part of the association of Karytaina, they have developed another project. I don't know what they're doing with it, but so there are more people interested in this project now.
Great,
So-
thank you.
If I could add one more thing, there's a real challenge between having genealogically sound evidence, building a tree that is evidence-based, and capturing the informal information that you're learning as you go along. And we've leaned towards capturing as much information as we can, and we're worrying about the evidence, the sourcing. Like, I spend a lot of time on my Palamedes ancestors and sourcing that and getting all the documents lined up and so on. So this is, I would say that village tree, Karytaina village tree, is an evergreen document that does not meet the genealogical proof standards. Just bear that in mind. It's our working tree, and we're doing our best to figure out relationships with that tree.
Yeah.
So you get
Right.
the information and then you go try to find the sources to back it up.
Well, we've got our notations. Like, if it's a full death date or a full birth date, then it came from the records. Sometimes people told me, and there was a discrepancy. I'd go by the record.
Of course.
Yeah, but and then sometimes you deduce a birth date from the death date because they say they were 70 years old. So then I have a note. I put several birth dates with gamma from the marriage records, and A from the death records for Boviosi.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult. We're trying to figure out how to annotate and make it clear.
It will take you some time, but I think you've already made tremendous progress, and the amount of information that you've been able to collect is phenomenal. Like, seriously, I think you are the VHPI project with the most records available. Even those for the area of Laconia, we do have many records, but we don't have this combination of, history books and then all the different types of records: mail registers, municipal registers, notarial records, birth records, death records, marriage records. You have a very nice variety of everything.
I think the notarial records are
It's a game changer. Yeah.
amazing resource. You are so fortunate to have those.
And there's so much to find. Like, if we can find what people have in their personal family collections. Like, when I cleaned out my father's apartment, I found my great-grandmother's will. I found the contracts, for marriage contracts for my great aunt, 2 of them, and the details that come in that explain what life was like. And this area of Greece was really fascinating. It was a nexus of political thought, and it grew many important professionals that led Greece in the next 200 years. There were doctors and lawyers and prime ministers, and I found my father's first cousin has 2 prime ministers in his family line. Like, this is
It's
there's
extraordinary.
something in this village in the mountains. People valued education, and the next step is to understand what life was really like, and to understand the women. We have so little about the women. That's sort of my vision of where we'd like to go. And I noticed there was one comment in the chat. The website is not live yet. When I get it done, I've purchased the domain name. It's www.karytainaancestry.com, but it's not live yet.
But we do have a Facebook group.
Yeah.
If you want to join, Karytaina Ancestry. Yes.
And so in the YouTube video description, I'm going to add all the links to your groups and the website, even if it's not live yet, and the tree, so that people can get to you and get in touch if they need anything or if they can contribute.
I want to say a little bit about what Karytaina was like 200 years ago. It wasn't a village. It was a big town. It was the county seat. It had the notaries, the courts. It was full of life, because in those days, during Turkish times, the Greeks lived in the mountains for protection. So it was like everyone lived on the mountaintops. You had Andritsina, Karytaina, Stemnica, Dimitsana. Everybody was in the mountains. There were some villages around, but the main thing was happening up in the mountains. Yeah. And the most famous person that we have, or one of the more famous from Karytaina, was Nicholas Dimitrakopoulos, whose mother was a Nikolapoulou. But he created the law for Greece. He's the nomothetis of Greece.
Oh.
Unfortunately, he didn't have children, but we have him in our tree too.
Cool.
And his father's line was from Andritsina. So there was a lot going on between, we have families like Palamides' family was in Stemnica too. You have these certain families, they were intermarrying between the big towns too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is very interesting, and I'm sure that we might even need to do a second Greek talk with you to follow up on what you've done in the meantime. Now we need to end today's episode. Thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing all this valuable information and tips. So Kalispera from Athens, good night. And
Thank you for all your help, Gregory.
My pleasure.
You for being so
Thank
inspired.
you so much,
Thank
Gregory.
you for
Without your help, we wouldn't be so far.
Thank you for inspiring us, Dina and Mary, and for showing how you can find each other through DNA and start collaborating and start doing something that will benefit people for generations. It's an amazing project.
Well, the 3 of you have been inspiring me since New York in 2014, when we had a fantastic.
That's a long time ago.
I was a baby. All right. Anyway.
You were with Papu.
All right.
Everybody.
Bye, everyone. Yes, yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes.